In recent months, I have come across two men who have truly gotten a victory over narcissistic personality disorder. Yes, yes, it can be done. God has been showing me and dealing with me on how I gotta become more loving to people suffering from narcissistic personality disorder because they are suffering and they're also suffering in silence. I now take a certain type of responsibility guiding people with NPD to a better existence. When I got HIV, I suffered in silence because I thought I was the only one. In my head, I thought I was alone. There was a problem in my mind. Narcissistic personality disorder is no different in that it tends to isolate people and make them very unhappy. It makes them miserable. I want everyone happy, even the high level narcissists, because ultimately they have, because ultimately, whatever it is that they have done it because they are unhappy. Therefore, this episode explores the beginnings of my love that I intend to spread to every person suffering from this disease that I can possibly speak to and insert something positive into their heart, into this whole world, because I am not okay with being happy when people around me are suffering in silence. It's not the way God intended us to be. I know a lot of people say NPD is not curable. I know a lot of people say these people cannot be helped. Well, I'm going to say the same thing that the Archangel Gabriel said to the Virgin Mary when he flew down here to tell her that she was going to be born a child of the Holy Ghost. And he had to explain to her when she got confused as to how this could be possible. And the angel Gabriel told her, I understand where you're coming from, but daughter, understand that with God, nothing shall be impossible. Thank you, Lord Jesus. So I invite those suffering with narcissistic personality disorder to accept the challenge to get well, to do better, to open your mind into the possibilities of a more peaceful life. I have not abandoned you, and I will not abandon you. You already feel alone. And the very last thing you need is for more people to tell you that your situation is entirely hopeless. I think you have a strong deliverance waiting for you. And I think that those of you who overcome narcissistic personality disorder, man, I think y'all are going to be some of the most incredible people that our society has ever seen. And you will be extremely close to God and be highly used of Him too. Because the scripture says He loves much who is forgiven much. So all you really have laying before you is potential to be great and to do great things for God in His world and in the one to come. Personally, I welcome you. I know that God welcomes you. God will not turn away from you. And God is always there for you. He always has been. The scripture says that if our hearts condemn us, then God is greater than our hearts. I'm going to say that again. If our hearts condemn us, God is greater than our hearts. Now, my people suffering out there, y'all are so hard on yourselves with this narcissistic personality disorder. But I choose to believe that my NPD babies out there are going to be all right. I'm going to speak that over y'all. Y'all are going to be all right. I have both seen and experienced the power of God in my life, and God is alive and active in your life, even though you may not be able to see it just yet. You will one day. And if it's any consolation to you, know that you are not alone, even if it's nothing more than knowing that this world has a lot of people suffering from the same sickness. So I encourage you to seek God, to seek a form of therapy that will work for you, to seek out support groups that have other people suffering like you are in them. With God, there is always hope. I don't want y'all hurting yourselves over NPD. See, suicide and self-harm are a real thing in the lives of people suffering from NPD, especially those suffering from covert narcissism. And see, it's worse for the covert narcissism in this sense because the covert narcissist turns inward. They don't go out. They don't talk to people. They can really get lost in our heads. And my desire is to pull you all as much into the light as I possibly can. Actually, it's God that will do the healing and not me. And what I am glad about, what I am so glad about, is that God is granting me the grace to look at somebody who has NPD as someone who really needs help and love more than anything else in the world. The Lord has healed me from all that I've been through with the narcissist in my life, and I want to present that healing to you as well. This is a much better feeling to be trying to help them than to be angry at them. See, look at God. God has allowed people with NPD into the world for the same reason He has allowed other types of personalities that are difficult to accept, understand, or love. It tests the love of the world. The primary purpose of this episode is to reach out to the heart of NPDs. I'm going to present a word of hope and light to those suffering from narcissistic personality disorder from God. God does not desire for any of us to be lost. I do not believe that anyone is beyond saving. I do believe healing is available for all of us. High level narcissists have a long road ahead of them, but with God, things are possible. Let us help our fellow humans suffering in this way and find love in a way that they have never found it before. Let us show them pity. Let us show them much mercy. What people suffering from NPD need is a new way to interpret the life that they've been living. My evangelist Nelson used to say, prayer changes things. Change is very much possible, but I need you to try. I hope this episode inspires you to see that there is a better way available to you. Please bear with me as I struggle to understand more deeply just what narcissistic personality disorder is and what I can do about it. And look, I'm not saying that I completely understand everything I went through with this past relationship. I'm not saying I completely understand the damage that it did, but what I am saying it is time for me to turn the attention away from me and to put it on the people who are suffering in this way. Because really, it all boils down to pain. Reach out to me. Let me know what you think about this episode, and please share it with somebody that you know. I love you. And just remember that everything is going to be all right. Hello, everyone in the world out there, and welcome back to the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast. I'm your host, Devanin, and I'm here with a word of healing and peace today for those of you who are suffering from narcissistic personality disorder. In this episode, we're going to talk about some of the signs and symptoms of an overt narcissist versus a covert narcissist. And we're going to talk about some different treatment options towards the end. There's an analyst who I discovered in Raquel Lerner's book that I've been reading. This beauty here called The Object of My Affection is in My Reflection. Real page turner, can't put it down. I've sent a couple of copies to a few people and they all have the same reviews about it. Anyway, this analyst that I discovered in Raquel's book, their name is Neville Symington. And they observed that when narcissism is opted for, it is protect the individual against appalling pain. Now, I know y'all have heard the shows and everything that I've been doing as I have been trying my best to process through all the hurt and the pain and the manipulation that I went through dealing with a covert narcissist who I was in a relationship with for almost 5 years. But, right now, God is calling me to move past like the angry phase and to forgive my ex and to just let him go. I'm happy to say that after the work that I've been down here in Puerto Vallarta doing, and a litany of prayers and all kinds of different dreams and different revelations that I've had and different signs and tokens that God has left me in different places that I go, things that I know when I see them as God speaking. My heart is starting to change. I'm starting to look at even my ex as somebody who I can have mercy on and show pity for. It's been a long road to get here, but this is the will of God for my life. I had a dream, not too long ago, and the Lord was telling me in this dream that it's time for me to forgive him. It can be easy for us to, they like people with a narcissistic personality disorder. And from this point on, I'll just refer to them as NPDs. So, I'm one of those people who if somebody's on death row, I'm like, I'm not advocating for their death. I'm like, I don't care what they did. When Jesus got crucified, he had, I think it was like a thief and a murderer with him. People society didn't particularly care for. God is a very patient individual. You know, I I'm not for the death sentence. I believe everybody can be redeemed and should be given as many chances as they need to get things right, to get their shit together. We have so many options in this world, from all kinds of spirituality at our fingertips to, endless education, to all kinds of therapy. It's there if you want it. People who I used to think were just mean assholes, and I went back and counted, and I think I'm up to about, shocked, because there was like 7 or 9 people in my life who are definitely, NPDs, and it was like a sense of relief to be able to make it make sense, why this person was just so aloof or mean or dissociated or seemed to lack empathy, and just, it made sense once I went back and put it together. It was just like everything like lined up. But I can see that these people are extremely misguided. They're very hurt, and they tend to not let that hurt go. How did my sponsor, when I was in the Crystal Meth Anonymous program, told me that if I have anger and resentment, that I hold on to it and I won't forgive people and untangle myself from that, then that's like me drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. This is a message that I would, speak to anybody suffering from narcissistic personality disorder. It took a long time for me to attach suffering to somebody who's on the high end of the narcissist scale, because of the damage that they do to people, on a consistent daily basis. But I've gotten to a point, God has brought me to a point where I can look on even somebody who is suffering from narcissistic personality disorder and just look on them with pity. I I would not want to live every day in just misery with little pockets of joy here and there, which really are nothing more than a distraction. And I'm gonna tell y'all, if you know, listen to this episode and share it with people, because we really have to be honest with ourselves and see if this is something that we have. I know some of these people who I now know are narcissists have been going to therapy for years, and they still have those same tendencies. Now, they're going in there lying to the therapist, or their therapy is not trauma informed enough to understand when they have somebody with NPD setting in front of them, which happens all the time, or then the wrong kind of therapy or something. But if you're going to bother to go to therapy, you really have to, to go with honest intentions and to tell the truth. But no matter what, I believe that you can grow to become some of the strongest people within our society, because you're going to have to overcome so much in order to do it. Overcoming things is what will make you truly strong, is what makes us all strong. And you will need a guide, to lead you out of this entanglement and this darkness that you've been living in. You see, it's like you've gotten used to the darkness. It's like you've gotten used to the confusion. You've gotten used to the way you hurt people. You've gotten used to it. That doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it beneficial to you. It certainly doesn't make it beneficial to the people in your sphere. But what I need you to do, and I'm talking to the people suffering from narcissistic personality disorders, to try to overcome your fears, and tell the truth to whomever you find to be your guide. And this needs to be somebody you can trust unequivocally, or at least work on trusting them unequivocally. Because if you can't tell them the truth, or at least work on telling them the truth, if you've gotten used to lying, it's gonna take some time for you to get unused to lying. That's not a switch you just gonna flip overnight. But how can they help you if they don't fully know what they're dealing with? So before I get too much into this, I'm gonna say a little prayer for the people suffering from narcissistic personality disorder, and
Look, if you're not one given a scripture and you don't really just hold God in reverence like that, that's fine. Y'all know I don't judge anybody for whatever their spiritual or religious or lack or not non-existent such practices are. But you have to stand for something, as they say, or you'll fall for anything. And so, God is who I believe in. And so that is why I reference the Christian scriptures. I don't identify as a Christian. I believe in the Trinity. I do not judge anybody for their religious practices or for not having them. So please just try to listen with an open mind and try to find a way to make it applicable to you. Father, right now, in the name of Jesus, I come into you, spreading my arms up to you on behalf of everybody suffering from this great problem. It pains me in many ways to know that I was walking alongside people through this life who were suffering in this type of silence, and I didn't know. But Lord, I know now, and I thank you for giving me the strength to stand up and do something about it. Lord, I don't care what they've done. I don't care who they've done it to, and they will come to you and confess and work on trying to stop it. I'm asking you to meet them wherever they're at and to grab their hand and to yank them up out of this mess that they are in. But with God, nothing shall be impossible. Help them to help themselves and help them to rise up higher in Jesus' mighty name. All right. The book of Isaiah, chapter 1, verses 15 through 20 says that when you spread forth your hands, I will hide my eyes from you. Yeah, when you make many prayers, I will not hear. Your hands are full of blood. Wash you, make you clean. Put away the evil of your doings from before my eyes. Cease to do evil. Learn to do well. Seek judgment. Relieve the oppressed. Judge the fatherless. Plead for the widow. Come now and let us reason together, says the Lord. Though your sins be as scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. Though they be red like crimson, they shall be as wool. If you be willing and obedient, you shall eat the good of the land. But if you refuse and rebel, you shall be devoured with the sword, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken it. Let me go through this with y'all. So verse 15, when you spread forth your hands, like I just did, it's not about being perfect. The Lord does not expect any of us to be perfect. He expects us to own up to whatever it is that we've done and to work on changing it. That is what Jesus came here for, to 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 wash away your sins, to give you a way out of trouble. Evangelist Nelson always used to say, when you do something, come and tell me, admit to it, talk to God about it. That's what the word of God is there for, to get you out of trouble. Yes, sometimes God is chastising us and getting on us, but as the Lord says, he loves those who he chastises. It's like if you're in a relationship with somebody, be it friends, romantic or other, true love is to challenge each other, not to accept all of your friends or your partner's habits and vices or their ways. You know, Challenging each other is how we get each other to rise higher. And when the Lord is getting on us, is not to be mean or anything like that, is to help us to grow. If somebody does not love you, then they just let you go on about your way as reckless as ever and don't mention anything. It is a loving thing to challenge people and to point out areas where our friends and loved ones and lovers might could do some adjusting. But with the Lord here saying, when you make many prayers, I will not hear, but your hands are full of blood. It's kind of like you can't really go to God non-repentant. And somebody's hands are going to still be full of blood because they haven't confessed what they've done. For somebody's hands to be full of blood, that means they're still continuing on in whatever it is that they're doing. Then I'm not saying that to what extent, God will or not won't hear you. You know, Jesus has done a lot for us in terms of, getting our complaints and petitions in front of God. But but what I do know is that your relationship with God, if you're trying to have one, will be hindered if you are yet in the midst of hurting people and you're not trying to change, you know. So when he says, wash you and make you clean and put away the evil of your doings, it's like God is talking to the nation of Israel here, and he's trying to chase after them like, well, I mean, like a lover would, a stray lover, trying to, or like maybe like a parent would a stray child, trying to get them to just act right. God is the like supreme being, none higher, none more powerful, none more wise, none greater. He don't have to chase after us like this. But God in all of his greatness is incredibly humble. He's at the same time both the epitome of power and the epitome of humility simultaneously. That blows my mind. He is pleading with his people to just act right, to just come to him and tell the truth. He says, learn to do well, seek judgment, relieve the oppressed. Thing about people who have narcissistic personality disorders that they tend to put people into oppression. So much of these laws and governance from like the Old Testament and the Bible have to do with just how anti-oppression God is. So this gets us into like relieving people from debts and letting all slaves go free. Different years, but there was like basically a maximum of 50 years that you would be in like a financial bondage or any sort of physical servitude to somebody else. The nations that were around Israel were heavy into oppression, and God didn't want his people like that. God doesn't like us, slaved under burdens in life. And unfortunately, NPDs, well, they're like slave drivers, in a lot of ways. You know, when when my relationship ended, it's like there was a relief that came, and I didn't understand just how subtly I had been brought into an oppression. It was a mental thing, a subtle emotional thing. It happened before I knew it, and then I got used to it. But then when I woke up from that, it was like, where have I been? It was like a spell had been lifted up off of me. And so, this the oppressive spirit that exudes from narcissistic people is not in line with God. You know, you I interesting, you're going to need spiritual help to deal with a spiritual problem. So just because you read lines like this, I suggest you press forward anyway and just get real with God in your prayers. They don't have to be all magical or mystical. Just be like, well, Lord, you see, I'm not a truthful person. I tend to make people miserable who are around me because I'm not happy. I don't want to be the oppressor. I want to help to liberate people. This is where I'm at right now. Just go to God and tell him the truth he already knows. So, but, like Gabriel told Mary when he went to deliver to her the news that she was going to be pregnant with child of the Holy Ghost. And she wondered within herself, how can these things be possible? Gabriel told her, with God, nothing shall be impossible. I do not subscribe to this thought that once an NPD, always an NPD. I don't believe that. I do not believe that. Everything is subject to change. Everything is subject to change. How? Well, we're going to talk about that. Come down, let us reason together. Though your sins be as scarlet, can be white as snow. Well, the thing with people with an NPD is that they don't think that what they're doing is wrong. So it's kind of hard to repent for something if you truly believe that it's right, because, your moral compass is not there. You don't really have empathy. And I guess you just can't see right from wrong. I don't know. I'm still learning about this. I just really felt like that God wanted me to come here today and give both a word of warning and relief. Either in this scripture and the one I'm about to read in Revelation, God does that. It's like he would hit his children with these, with like these rough words, and then he would turn right around and assuage them and give them a peaceable answer. You know, and the chastising was always to lead his children to a better day. But God wants to reason with you, and he wants to affect change. It doesn't matter how you are now. Sins can be red like crimson today. God wants to make them white as snow today. You don't have to stay the way you are, but it is a choice. Nobody can make somebody with NPD change. That's for sure. But I have heard of two accounts of people who are high level narcissists who went to therapy and they were able to see market improvement and to turn that aspect around in their life. One of them told me it's not like completely gone, but he can seize it when it comes up and then therefore does not have the dominance over him anymore. Okay. I'll take that. You see, to be delivered or something sometimes does not necessarily mean it's fully gone. Like Evangelist Nelson's husband, Pastor Lloyd Nelson once said, he was referring to like physical sicknesses, but I believe it can expand into other areas of life. He said, just because you die with something, don't believe you die because of it. That doesn't mean that you die because of it. So having tendencies that sprout up and being able to recognize them, and some days may be better than others, but that's a heck of a lot better than not even being aware that what you're doing is hurting people or wrong. So I have heard two accounts of people who have gained significant recovery from narcissistic personality disorder. He says, you be willing and obedient, you will eat the good of the land. So just because you prosper in this life in terms of material possessions, friends, sexual partners, lovers, whatever, travel, whatever the things you like, you know, and just different advantages and open doors those things are not going to make you happy. And then it doesn't mean that those things necessarily came forth from the Lord or from a good place at all. Because why? Because, we read in the scriptures where, how the Holy Ghost led Jesus up to the mountain after he got baptized to be tempted of Satan. And one of the things Lucifer tries to give Jesus is all the riches and kingdoms of the world, only in exchange if he shall bow down and worship him. Now, I've spoken this once before. Lucifer is the original narcissist. I don't mean that insultingly to him, but any kind of evil in this world didn't come from, did not like necessarily originate, with God. Yes, God can create evil, but he doesn't go around putting it into people like that. So Lucifer, the original narcissist, tried to get Jesus to give him adulation and to worship him. I guess he thought he could get some attention and some praise from Jesus in that weakened state. But my point is, the devil has power to manipulate and navigate the riches of this world. Okay. I've heard of people trying to do like rituals and different, like spiritual rituals and different things like that to try to demonically gain wealth and things and things like that. I ain't gonna say it's impossible. We've heard, the rumors of maybe certain sacrifices, human sacrifices and things like that, that certain people, in the spotlight may or may not have done in order to gain celebrity and notability. We see this in American Horror Story. Gosh, I think it was season 9, where the new voodoo queen gets her talk show and everything, and it was not by natural means. So we want to be careful that our strength is pure and righteous, and that the way we go about acquiring things is of the Lord, and not to be deceived into thinking that just because life's going good, what we're able to do or get, that this is like true living. In the book of Revelation, in chapter 3, verses 17 through 18, it says, "Because you say, I am rich and increased with goods and have need of nothing, and know not that you are wretched and miserable and poor and blind and naked. I counsel you to buy of me gold tried in the fire, that you may be rich, and white raiment, that you may be clothed, and that the shame of your nakedness do not appear, and anoint your eyes with eye salve, that you may see." Now, why would Jesus tell people who are already rich and increased with goods and don't have need of anything to buy more gold? The difference here is that what Jesus is offering is gold tried in the fire. This here is a higher level of wealth that extends beyond this plane of existence. It's true prosperity as heaven would judge it. And he says that they may be rich. So as Jesus is analyzing them, it doesn't matter what they've accomplished in this world. He does not consider them to be wealthy or rich at all. And although they already have clothes, he's considered them to be quite exposed and naked. So, and how is God, really, really looking at us? You know, and then he says for them to anoint their eyes with eye salve that they may see. So what he's telling them is that it doesn't matter how they live their life, what they've gained, what they've acquired, where they've been able to go, no matter how prolific their sex life might be. What the Lord is saying here is that you have been blind, and as far as he's concerned, your eyes still need to be open. Now, isn't that something to amass things in this earth, things that are popular, and to get before Jesus and he tells you that you didn't have a clue what you were doing? Now, the comfort here for my NPDs out there is that I don't think anyone could argue that you are certainly amongst the most emotionally and spiritually poor in this world. You don't have a lot of, internal things going on. It's sad to say, but it's true. But can't we see, from these scriptures here, how how God and Jesus have so much mercy and pity on people in any kind of like poor and broken state? Jesus said he came to help the sick of the world, and whatever's poor, whatever's broken, whatever needs mending is why Jesus came here. He didn't come here to fix people who are already together. If you are suffering from narcissistic personality disorder, you are in definite need of assistance, both spiritually and physically, because you're not happy. You know the things that you do to try to hide, and you know that you are full of fear, and all kinds of self-loathing and things like that. And all I'm trying to say is that it doesn't have to be that way, but you're gonna have to get honest with God. And even if you got to start there before you can begin to get honest with people, start in your prayers. That is one thing I'll say, about my ex. I taught him how to pray. When I met him, I began to talk to him about spiritual things and God. To him, he said God was just some dude floating in the sky. Those were his words, not mine. I was like, okay, so I can work with that. By the time the relationship ended, I can say like his prayers, the way they were becoming more fervent. The anointing was getting up in his prayers. The spirit was getting up in his prayers. I talked to him about baptism and things like that, and waited for him to tell me when he was ready. And I personally baptized him. So I've seen somebody who's an extreme covert narcissist begin to grow spiritually. That is a good seed, that was planted. Maybe God will do something with that one day. His physical behavior seemed like it only got worse, but who knows when God won't do what he's going to do. So what I'm saying is start down the path on a better spiritual journey and a better physical journey in terms of mental health treatments and things like that. And even if you don't see immediate results, keep doing it anyway. When it's not easy and the world isn't going how you expect it to be, Don't let that sadness come and prevail over you. Don't let yourself get disappointed and pessimistic. Get up and try again. Get up and try again. You've been this way a long time. Okay, it's gonna take some undoing, but it can be done. Then Revelation in the second chapter says, unto the angel of the church in Smyrna write, these things says the first and the last, which was dead and is alive. I know your works and tribulation and poverty. And in parentheses, it says, but you are rich. As many as I love, I rebuke and chasten. Be zealous, therefore, and repent. So now this is Jesus had words to say to more than a few churches there at the beginning of the book of Revelation. And this is the only one that he did not have a criticism for. The only one that he says is poor. Now, this church in Smyrna they had like their ability to trade stripped from them. They had fallen into all this persecution and everything. And they were going through a time. They were living in poverty. Okay. But Jesus is looking at them and going, I don't care what the world says about you. As far as I'm concerned, you are rich. It stands out to me that Jesus says that he was the first and the last, he which was dead and is alive. There are many people in psychological circles who refer to people with narcissistic personality disorder as the living dead, or the walking dead. I have to say, I agree. I think about like vampires who have to constantly leech off of people in order to feel anything or to feel alive or to keep going. But no matter how much they do that, they cannot become undead, or zombies that have to keep munching on people. It's like constant action without true, deep, through the marrow of the bone and through the soul satisfaction. That is what you don't have when you abide in a high narcissistic way. You have like you look alive, but you're really not. Not down to your core. And but that's okay because Jesus is saying that he's already experienced death, and he understands what it's like to be dead and to come back alive. So really, if you have NPD, what you need is a resurrection. You need a new heart, you need a new mind, like a new spiritual heart, a new mind, you need a new soul. You need to do a whole makeover. But the Lord says he has the power to make all things new. And that's a beautiful thing. You can get a deliverance like that. And I believe that you can, but you're gonna have to work for it. You'll have to work for it. Yes, miracles do happen. And yeah, what I'm saying you have to reach for is a miracle, but it's not like it's out of reach. And then getting back to Isaiah chapter 1, verse 20, it says, but if you refuse and rebel, you shall be devoured with the sword. The mouth of the Lord has spoken it. I feel like, the narcissist undoing will be themselves. Like I do. You can't, everything you put out there is going to come back to you. There's no other way around it. So, if you keep hurting people, saying all kinds of crass things to them and not care how their feelings hurt, lying, leading double lives, cheating, intentionally manipulating, saying and do things to taunt people because it's going to cause them misery. That's just going to bring more of that to you. Because the Lord says in another place that they that live by the sword must die by the sword. That there can be no other way. But it is all being stated so that you can be warned and change. In Psalm 119, it says, I thought about the direction that I was headed in and I turned around. You can always turn around. As Dave Collins says in his song, as long as you are breathing, baby, you can start all over again. God's grace and mercies are new every morning. It's available to you. You just got to reach out and get it. It's just like seeing, as my knowledge increases as I go through Raquel's book, I'm coming into a great understanding of just how much people with NPD are in serious, serious, serious pain. And I mean serious. This is not like this is not good. I have a bleeding heart. I don't like to see people cry. I don't let people suffer. I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I want to see people happy and, living true life. But when people who are rich, and kill themselves and things like that, it's like, okay, what did we miss? How did this happen? Where was their joy really coming from? They didn't get it from any of their activities in life. And these are people who have had way more access to things than many of us has, and it still wasn't enough. So then what must we change? Our perspective and inside of us. What I'm offering is one way that I know that you can do that. So then how does this reconcile with how I told you before when I was talking about a narcissistic personality disorder, people having reprobate minds, and how the Lord, has told us to turn away from such people? Well, if you've been hurt by somebody who's a high level narcissist suffering with NPD, that person has neural pathways and habits that have trained them, or they've gotten used to hurting you. However instant or sudden it may be, they they are in their own way. And a lot of narcissists don't really like to change, their stripes too much. You cannot heal yourself by constantly being exposed to them hurting you. They are not going to be able to focus on healing themselves when they're still, how shall I say this, when the broken parts of their mind and is in their spirit is still causing them to hurt you. Okay, like they only have so much energy. So they can't play the games they think they need to play in order to keep you around and truly work on them, because they may just go to the therapist or whatever just for a show. Let me see. There was something that I read in Raquel Lerner's book. She says that people with NPD usually reserve punishment for those they are in relationships with, and I don't think she meant just intimate. This is why people who are high level narcissists are so nice to people they don't know. It's much easier for them to have a positive exchange with a total stranger than with somebody who really cares for them, because they don't have to demonstrate their true vulnerabilities and the things that they fear that the world is going to judge them for, the things that they feel are not good enough. Because narcissists are very, very masochistic. They are so hard on themselves and their minds. But hey, if it's just, a casual sex with some dude off the internet, that's much easier for a narcissist than like a deeply committed relationship. If it's a parent who's a narcissist being kind with a stranger at a grocery store, but then getting home and yelling at everyone in the house, you know, they don't they don't need as much of their mask if they don't feel like they're going to be attacked or possibly be seen for who they are. You see, but in order for a narcissist to somebody who's a high level narcissist to overcome, this is a journey that you really have to take by yourself, because you cannot function without a person to react to in some way. So narcissistic personality disorder cannot exist in a vacuum. Like there has to be some human, some living being for the narcissist to take it out on, to beat up, to say nasty things to twist and manipulate, to dangle like a rat in front of a cat and let it and just tease and taunt the poor thing. They can't do that alone. So I don't know. I suggest you consult, a mental health professional about what they would recommend. And we'll talk about some types of psychotherapies that have been known to work with narcissism towards the end of this episode. It'll take a lot of bravery, but I just don't see how it could be done any other way. I just don't. I read something where even an inpatient medical treatment is recommended and indicated for people trying to get over narcissistic personality disorder. Now, why might that be? To take, I mean, the same way the reason why you always admit people in inpatient is to get them away from their surroundings and their environment so that whatever negativity they're trying to overcome is not going to be just ultimately reinforced. So I don't know what alone looks like. What I would suggest to ask the mental health professional is, you know, can you still have a romantic relationship? You have to let certain friends go. It's going to depend probably on those dynamics, but basically, how can you remove yourself from everybody you're manipulating and hurting so that you can grow? I don't know because you also cannot exist in a vacuum. I don't know, but I do think pausing at least for a little bit, even if it's only a few weeks or a few months or something like that, to just gain some introspection and see a new direction that you can go in can be beneficial. But something's going to change because that no matter what you've done, that you're still not truly happy. Towards the end of my last relationship, I was asking him, what makes you happy? Are you happy? He really couldn't answer. We had done so much and been so many places and done so many things, and none of that. This is before I realized, what he was. None of those things made sense. How can you not be happy? And I'm like, well, what do you actually want? Could answer it. What you want, if you are suffering from narcissistic personality disorder, is to be made whole. You want to embrace who you are and be able to come out in the world and not feel like you need the praise of people. And you want to accept yourself and not give a damn if anyone else does. You want to live the truth. You tell your lies, but deep down, you know that that's not actually getting you anywhere. That's all to hide. You know, you gotta learn boldness, to really make it in this life, and it's not a bold way to live. So there's a lot of denialism that comes along with the narcissism because a lot of people suffer from narcissistic personality disorder don't like to admit they have problems. And so, well, you're not going to get very far if you cannot, admit that you have something going on because you cannot heal from something that you never did. And so your cycle will continue. So I'm going to read through some of the general narcissism, overt narcissism, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to read through that, and then I'm going to read through some of the definitions of covert narcissism as well. And there's more types than that and all kinds of subtypes, which you will learn whenever you pick up Raquel Lerner's book. But let's see, general narcissism. Let's see, narcissistic personality disorder is a mental health condition in which people have an unreasonably high sense of their own importance. They need and seek too much attention and want people to admire them. People with this disorder may lack the ability to understand or care about the feelings of others, but behind this mask of extreme confidence, they are not sure of their self worth and are easily upset by the slightest criticism. A narcissistic personality disorder causes problems in many areas of life, such as relationships, work, school, or financial matters. People with narcissistic personality disorder may be generally unhappy and disappointed when they're not given the special favors or admiration that they believe they deserve. They may find their relationships troubled and unfulfilling, and other people may not enjoy being around them. Treatment for narcissistic personality disorder centers around talk therapy, also called psychotherapy. We'll talk about those more towards the end. Narcissistic personality disorder affects more males than females and often begins in the teens or early adulthood. Some children may show traits of narcissism, but this is often typical for their age and doesn't mean they'll go on to develop narcissistic personality disorder. Mhm. Symptoms of narcissistic personality disorder and how severe they are can vary. People with the disorder can. So I'm going to read through some of these symptoms. Maybe this is something that you're suffering with and you don't know. because it comes the way narcissistic NPDs work and operate is natural to them as an empathetic person. Like it comes as easy to a person who's a high level narcissist to lie and manipulate and go out and cheat as it is for an empathetic person to tell the truth, be vulnerably honest, and to never cheat. It's two different. It's two different. It's two different songs they're singing. It's like they were two different instruments. One would be tuned to the key of G sharp, and another one to the key of A minor. Like you can't. And each key makes sense to the respective instrument, and that's all that there is to it. So let's see. So have an unreasonably high sense of self-importance and require constant excessive admiration. Again, this is the overt narcissist, not the covert narcissist. So there is plenty of overlapping amongst all the narcissism and subtypes, though, mind you. Feel that they deserve privileges and special treatment, expect to be recognized as superior even without achievements, make achievements and talent seem bigger than they are, be preoccupied with fantasies about success, power, brilliance, beauty, or the perfect mate, believe they are superior to others and can only spend time with or be understood by equally special people, be critical of and look down on people they feel are not important, expect special favors and expect other people to do what they want without questioning them, take advantage of others to get what they want, have an inability or unwillingness to recognize the needs and feelings of others, be envious of others and believe others envy them, behave in an arrogant way, brag a lot and come across as conceited, insist on having the best of everything, for instance, the best car, or office. At the same time, people with narcissistic personality disorder have trouble handling anything they view as criticism. They can become impatient or angry when they don't receive special recognition or treatment, have major problems interacting with others and easily feel slighted, react with rage or contempt, and try to belittle other people to make themselves appear superior, have difficulty managing their emotions and behavior, experience major problems dealing with stress and adapting to change, withdraw from or avoid situations in which they might fail, feel depressed and moody because they fall short of perfection, have secret feelings of insecurity, shame, humiliation, and fear of being exposed as a failure. Good God, I just feel such sadness for people who like literally walk around with all of this swirling inside of them, every day, and they're not telling anybody or reaching out for help. When to see a doctor. So people with narcissistic personality disorder may not want to think that anything could be wrong, so they usually don't seek treatment. Or instead of admitting you have a problem, baby, if they do seek treatment, it's more likely to be for symptoms of depression, drug or alcohol misuse, or another mental health problem. When they view what they view as insults to self-esteem may make it difficult to accept and follow through with treatment. Yeah. If you recognize aspects of your personality that are common to narcissistic personality disorder, or you're feeling overwhelmed by sadness, consider reaching out to a trusted healthcare provider, mental health provider. Getting the right treatment can make your life more rewarding and enjoyable. So, like depression and like OCD and different things like that do run concurrent with narcissistic personality disorder. It is not uncommon to see somebody with NPD be on all kinds of like regimens and treatments for all of these other circular issues. The issue I have with the way therapy is done in these United States is that so many therapists don't know how to recognize NPD. Yeah, I don't know if it was of God. Pretty sure it was, but nevertheless, me and my ex, we went to couples counseling twice. I had sent him over to the hypnotherapist that I use so that they could refer him to one. He was using the same licensed clinical social worker as I do. I have a feeling the hypnotherapist probably picked up on that, but it's not like they could exactly tell me. But the other three, never a word. And then my ex never really told me too much about what was going on, in his private sessions. But that's a lot of therapy, over all of those years for I mean, they got the anxiety, they got they got some of the other things that were going on with him. They picked up on that, but they completely miss, you know, the whole narcissism part. And I get therapists can only go off of what you tell them. Yeah, my ex, was an exquisite liar, but there's other ways though that you can discern this. It's very subtle. It's very subtle. And I'll tell you now that I'm out of that situation. When I meet a narcissist now, I can see it quick. I can see it so quick. Anyway, I digress. That's a gripe I have. If you're a therapist, please learn something about narcissistic personality disorder. If you have children, give them this woman's book, or if y'all learn this book, or sit down and teach them. And before they start dating, don't let them walk out that house on that first date without knowing about this. It's just too prevalent. It's just too much. It's like literally everywhere I go, I hear so many stories about people who've been impacted by people who have narcissistic personality disorder everywhere. If I'm on the phone handling business, the representative, same thing. It's like covert narcissism now. The symptoms, covert narcissism. Well, let me see. I'm, I'm getting ahead of myself. The symptoms will be infused in what I'm about to say, but this has to do with shyness and introversion. Now, covert narcissism is more strongly linked to introversion than other types of narcissism. This relates to narcissistic insecurity. People with covert NPD are deeply afraid of having their flaws or failures seen by others. Exposing their innermost feelings of inferiority would shatter the illusion of their superiority. Avoiding social interaction helps lower the chances of exposure. When I read this one, and look, I'm done being angry at my ex, but it's my lived experience. So when although I said there's 7 or 9 narcissists, this is like the main one that I've been with. So I'm going to have to reference our situation. He's forgiven, all was well, and I'm doing my best to move forward. But here I thought he was just this quiet, socially awkward nerd just because he was an introvert, not because he was high level narcissist. It's 2 different things. It's different if you just kind of don't like to go out. It's different if you're doing it to intentionally hide from the world. you know, and I think about that statement that he made years ago, and he was like, he said he doesn't think people really want to know the truth. He lied towards the end of our relationship once when I challenged him again on that. And he said he had walked that back. He never did. And what he was saying was his interpretation of the world is that truth is not important. You can have whatever fantasy you want as long as people are seem to be happy and you get what you want from people. Go ahead and tell that lie. You know, people who are high level narcissists think this way. They get lost in fantasies and they cannot separate their fantasies from reality. Going out, so avoiding going out, you know, they've told themselves that this is an acceptable way to live rather than facing whatever the issues and risking being hurt. Things may not go the way you plan. They can't, people with NPD cannot handle rejection and the emotions that come along with that. But learning to set in those emotions are a part of the human experience. So we cannot run from hurt and pain and disappointment and go run into sex, go do drugs, go steal from people, go hurt them. We have to face the emotions. That is the only way out is through, not diversions and distractions. So I was just shocked just to see, like, okay, he wasn't just, a homebody for the sake of being a homebody. He was a homebody out of fear, out of going out, and being rejected by people. I tried to push him to go out. I would take him to clubs and on trips and things like that. And at some point, he seemed to enjoy himself. I'd be lying if I said he didn't open up about some of his insecurities, but I really didn't see a whole lot of letting it go. Because another thing with people who are high level narcissists, they tend to hold grudges. They like to hold on to the pain that people have put upon them or they perceive that they put upon them. Confessing that you have and insecurity is one thing, but n- not really, really working to get rid of it is another thing entirely. One of his chief complaints was something that a girl said to him like back when he was in middle school. He was almost, I think he's going to be like 27 this year. Middle school, how old are we? 12, 13, 11, something like that. I was like, okay, when somebody first does you something, whoever you are, it is on them for having done it. But after time, if you're still mad about it, that's just you. That's just you. At this point, it has nothing to do with what that girl said. And what that began to teach me about my ex is that he wants to be better. He does not want to let any of it go. We were in round the second couples counseling like years later, and this was the first time he mentioned this girl. We had been together for 3, 4, 3, 4 years, and now I'm just now hearing about something that she said that hurt his feelings. you know, him not being able to, express his sexuality in his household, which it boggles my mind because both of his parents are totally gay affirming. He mentioned something. Some outer relatives, aunts and uncles or whatever said that was anti-LGBTQ, but I was like, "That's not what your mom and dad said." And that people with narcissistic personality disorder have a tendency to take on that negative voice so much easier than they do the positive wherever it is coming from. So y'all gotta really, really watch the voices that you allow to control you because the negativity controls narcissistic people. They are under a heavy hand of oppression. That's why they're able to oppress other people. So let's see, they simultaneously feel superior and tend to distrust others. Some of the symptoms are going to be self consciousness, insecurity, defensiveness, sensitivity. Look, if you think you're going to get a meaningful apology out of an NPD, just move on because you won't. You might force them to say the word, but they are not actually sorry. They don't possess that access to that emotion. Sensitivity to what others think of them, high sensitivity to criticism. It's like Trump, the different people you see in the media have every kind of insult for everybody, demeaning, demeaning, demeaning. But let somebody say something about them, you know, passive aggression, the tendency to put themselves down. This is not what you think. Let me read this further. It says they might speak modestly about their contributions, and I would add about themselves, with an underlying goal of earning compliments and recognition, or they may offer a compliment to get one in return. So what this is saying is that a high level narcissist is going to try to bait you into saying something nice about them by feigning humility in a way for a while. Oh, and I should have said this, at the beginning. This information is coming from healthline.com and Mayo Clinic. I'm going to put both of those links in the show notes as I always do. Grandiose fantasies, feelings of depression, anxiety, and emptiness. Covert narcissism involves a higher risk of co occurring depression and anxiety than other types of narcissism. There are two major reasons for this. Fear of failure or exposure may contribute to anxiety, and frustration over idealized expectations not matching up with real life. And the inability to get needed appreciation from others can trigger feelings of resentment and depression. Now, a lot of the things that plague, NPDs or what they make of it in their head and not actually how it is. This is worse with a covert narcissist because they don't do a lot of talking. See, like with Trump, he says the quiet part out loud. You know exactly what he's thinking, what his next moves will be. You're just like he's just like word vomit all the time. A covert narcissist has those same sort of that same sort of dialogue going on, but it's just going on in their head. And then nobody can check them on it, help them with it until they become a victim of their own grandiose fantasies. Then they can't separate, the real from the fake. Let me see. Frustration over idealized expectations not matching up with real life. Hmm. Let me see. What kind of analogy? Like I was mentioning earlier, when you begin to try these different things to become unlike any sort of person you've been before. You've been somebody who's been controlled and dominated by a narcissistic personality disorder. Um, Now you don't want to be. Everything's not going to go your way, just because you want it to. In my relationship, when my ex was trying to be vulnerable and open about something, sometimes I did not respond to him like he thought I should. Well, the thing to do is to talk about it, work through it, try again. You know, he fell into a victim playing mode and was like, and these would be things that we agreed to do in counseling, maybe for him to share his feelings or whatever. uh, You know, so then we'd go back to counseling, and then here comes the victim playing. His verbiage was always, "Y'all told me to do this." Being you, Devannon, and these counselors wanted me to try being vulnerable and show my feelings, and I knew this would happen. And you know, Debbie Downer, negative Nick, all of that. But as I got ready to leave him, he asked me to be patient with him, with his double, leading his double lives and sleeping, in town all over Baton Rouge and out of Baton Rouge. You know, I couldn't, I could not reconcile that sort of double standard. So he would come to counseling, and he never changed from the y'all. This is why couples counseling is contraindicated with somebody who has NPD, because they're going to twist the whole scene around. He basically blamed the counselor and me for forcing this idea of trying to be open and vulnerable upon him. I told him, "You're grown. You sit here and agree to what you were going to do. At best, what you can say is, we agreed to this and it didn't work. What's another way we can do it?" But instead, he stopped at poor me, woe is me. Is there anything that I can do with that? And look, when y'all get ready to leave these narcissists, these high level narcissists suffering from narcissistic personality disorder, they will try to get you to stay in some kind of way. Not because they actually like you, but because they like how comfortable you've made life for them. You will not actually miss them. Okay, you're going to miss the idealized goals you had for them and for you as a couple. Okay, everything with them is transactional, and they don't keep relationships. People with NPD will not keep relationships unless they can see what the gain is going to be. I'm talking about some sort of long term, relationship. They're all about, quick, shallow exchanges with people. They can do that all day. But be patient with yourself. Try your best not to play the victim. People are not actually as out to get you as you might think that they are. That's a part of the paranoia that was mentioned earlier. Taking a step back, taking a high level view and checking your perspective is something that, your counselor, again, God can help you with. Let me see. The next one is a tendency to hold grudges. Oh my God, as I was ending this relationship, I could not tell exactly what, my ex was so bitter and angry and mad about. I think it was just about everything. You know, when he would examine his past, didn't have that much good to say about it, except for the bitter things. Presently, when he was with me, had nothing but complaints, and then he wasn't looking forward to getting older because he believes that once you turn 30, you have to stop having fun. He doesn't know why, he thinks that he just does. Mm. And at some point, I asked him to just list whatever issues you have with me. Maybe the counselor asked us for that. List whatever your bitter resentments are. You know, and I took this outside of counseling because he had so many issues. We didn't have enough time for them, for them all. So on the first night that we tried to talk through his issues with me, I was thinking it was going to be something that I was currently doing or had been doing, and just wasn't aware of. He pulled something out of the hat from, like, say, a year and a half ago, you know, of the date of whenever we had this conversation last fall. I couldn't contain my anger because I was already on edge with him, for doing all the things that he was doing. And I'm like, why are you still in this relationship and still taking trips with me and traveling and trying to do all the things that we were trying to do, and you still mad about something from like a year and a half ago and haven't said anything? We would go to counseling. The counselor would ask him, Ethan, is there anything you would like to say? He would sit there and not say anything. The first time we went to couples counseling, they said, tell us everything that anyone has ever done to ever hurt you. He said, I'm good. I don't have any problems. They don't like to let the grudges go because if they were to do that, then they can't reinforce the self victimization thing. You have to have something to play the victim with. And so this whole forgiveness and letting go, like, it's likely that, Ethan has tried to find some sort of way to present to whatever people he considers weak enough to be in regular communication with, that somehow he was victimized through this. Like, I think he felt like I was wrong for not staying to walk with him through this whole, are you a narcissist? Are you a sex addict thing? But I was unwilling to do that because I asked him years ago if he was a sex addict, and he said no. As I left him, he was on the fence about it. He said kind of maybe. He only was talking about doing 6 of the 12 steps in Sex Addicts Anonymous. 2 months into it almost, he still didn't have a sponsor. It only took me like 2 weeks to get a sponsor. I could see that he wasn't seriously committed. He was going to the meetings, but he really wasn't doing, the motivation wasn't there. You see, so when you get ready to leave, they're gonna start acting right. Ethan ran out and got, colorful clothes and things like that. It's things that I have been asking him to do for the whole 5 years instead of wearing all those dark colors. So they do listen. They're intentionally not doing the things that they know you will like, just to taunt you and hurt you. If you're somebody listening at some of these symptoms the way I'm describing my ex, and you know that you've done this in relationships, you might be somebody living with sorry, living with NPD. Whether you're covert or overt is, something for you to decide and to go over with your therapist. How have you acted when somebody wanted to leave you? How have you acted when you got close to somebody and your vulnerabilities were starting to show? Are you able to handle yourself when you get angry? Can you go to people and tell them what's going on, or do you just come up with some other way to get even secretly? This isn't just like your nature, who you are. It's a dysfunction, and it's a disability, prevailing within you. Envy, do you always compare yourself, with people? Feelings of inadequacy. When people with covert narcissism can't measure up to these superhuman standards they set for themselves, they may feel inadequate in response to this failure. These feelings of inadequacy can trigger shame, anger, a sense of powerlessness. And then there's also something called a self serving empathy. So, contrary to popular belief, it is possible for people with NPD to at least show empathy, but they spend so much time trying to build up their self esteem and establish their importance that this often gets in the way. My ex was the most empathetic if I did something to hurt myself, like dealing with drugs or something like that, or when I would cry over Evangelist Nelson's death, like I did this one time, just like randomly out of nowhere. I really think during those times he was being genuine, but a lot of people would be genuine in the case of an emergency. So I can't really accord that too much to his personality, you know. So what this is saying is you're not going to be able to tell when it's real and when it's fake, you know, which is a hallmark of any type of narcissistic personality disorder. You don't know what's real and what's fake. They weave in and out of truth and lies so seamlessly. But what you don't know is when you weave a web like that, when you weave a web like that, you're going to get caught in it yourself, and you already are caught in it. That's why you're not truly happy. People with covert narcissism in particular may seem to have empathy for others. They might seem willing to help others or take on extra work. You might see them performing an act of kindness or compassion, such as giving money and food to someone sleeping on the street or offering their spare bedroom to a family member who was evicted. But they generally do these things to win the approval of others. If they don't receive praise or admiration for their sacrifice, they may feel bitter and resentful and make remarks about how people take advantage and don't appreciate them. Yeah, they they do that, hmm, they do this. It's okay if somebody thanks you, but we can't go around doing stuff just for the approval of others because really what you're doing is giving humans control over you. If you're only doing something to hope somebody's going to notice it, not for the good that it's doing, then why do it at all? Then if you don't get the praise that you want, then you're sad. Back in my most insecure days, when I actually finally had the body I wanted, was having all the sex I could possibly get and made good money was when I was my most miserable. I had unresolved issues from dealing with the church and this was all before, you know, I contracted, the HIV and the hepatitis B. This 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 was this was I could literally be in a nightclub full of people or at a house party and I would just be overcome with like loneliness and I would feel like I was the only person there. So when I tell you, being alone in a room full of people is it's like worse than just being alone, being at home or wherever. So when I tell you I know that having money and ability and having a whole lot of sex and things like that don't solve happiness. I mean, does not solve sadness and they don't make you happy. I know because I've lived that. If anything, doing all those things made it worse because it was like, like you should be, but you're not. If in those days, if I went to the club and I was looking real cute as I always was, and nobody complimented me, I felt like the whole night was wasted. Look at all the power I gave people over me. If I traveled somewhere, didn't find someone to sleep with, I felt like the whole trip was wasted. Why would I give that much credence to sex? Sex is a part of life. It should not have that much of a pedestal. Not all the positive, beautiful experiences. If I didn't get sex, same thing I get back in my hometown. I felt like I was like the whole thing was just wasted and I just missed the whole boat. In relationships with people who are high level narcissists, they start off doing good things for you and then they trickle away and stop maybe all at once or over time. Ethan used to make, I think he like once made like a candlelit dinner, you know, like that one time. And I think I asked him about this later on. It came up in counseling, and he said the reason he didn't do it anymore is because he didn't feel like I showed enough appreciation. Well, he didn't tell me that. He never told me what forms of appreciation he would prefer, and he never was someone to say thank you. Thank you and sorry was something that I never got from him. But, if it's something that he did, then and I think that it was just a part of his being, a high level narcissist and controlling why it stopped. I don't think it was because due to a lack of gratitude. I'm a pretty thankful person. I think that was just the lie that he made up in the moment to try to make himself look good. So if you have done this to somebody, you started doing something kind and it's been a while and you don't do that anymore, if there's no heart and soul in it, then you might be somebody suffering with NPD. I like getting flowers. I ask Ethan to bring me flowers like once a month, or maybe twice a month, or whatever the case may be. He was like, I need you to remind me to do it so I don't forget. Eventually, he did forget and he just stopped. But my thing is this, when we put everything in our phones, we have all these reminders. Why couldn't he do that? Why? Because I wasn't important to him. No, I wasn't. Towards the end of the relationship, I asked him, what do I mean to you? He started spouting out all the things I do for him. I gave him my own personal list, access to which I've now revoked, of the things, the complaints and the things that were hurting me that we were taking to counseling and working through. And I told him to go through this list and to come up with something to talk about. I meant for me to help me. He went through that list and came up with things to try to defend himself and then justify himself. He was quiet and unassuming, but he, was a very selfish person who could not get over himself. Insecure, hates himself, but also can't get over himself. This is nothing that's unique to him. People people who suffer from NPD are the same way. It's like you have yourself in this purgatory where you're neither here nor there. You're not going forward, you're not going backward. Talking about internally. You're not hot, you're not cold, you're somewhere in the middle. And it's not good to be in the middle. You need to be yes or no about a lot of things in this life because that gray area is the breeding ground for confusion and chaos. And I know if you're somebody with NPD, you might like that gray area, but that gray area is hurting you just as much as you're hurting other people, if not worse. I am thankful that I can talk about all of this that happened now and keep a calm demeanor. It doesn't upset me anymore. Like I said, I've let it all go. It is really, really hard though when you've been with somebody for like almost 5 years and you realize that they never really liked you anyway. Not really, but that's only because they don't like themselves. Feelings of emptiness and thoughts of suicide are also associated with covert narcissism. I think that this is because the covert narcissism has more of a tendency and ability to get lost in their own thoughts. When somebody gets to a point where they're willing to hurt themselves over the way they're perceiving the world around them, their thoughts have gotten control of them. Negative thoughts have gotten control of them. And unlike an overt narcissist who's out there, center of the crowd, center of attention, everyone loves them. A covert narcissist is going to cave into themselves more quickly than an overt narcissist will. So none of this is worth dying over. None of this is worth being unhappy over. But you're not going to be able to become happy if you won't let go of the things you people either did to you or you thought they did to you. You must forgive. You can't be forgiven if you don't forgive, and then you can't be happy. If you insist upon carrying all that baggage around. Sometimes I would look at my ex and he would look like a 70-year-old man to me. Just I don't know if this would be at times where I was actually looking at the true him and not any of the masks that he has. It was just like, I don't know, another spirit or something would I would just look at him and I could just, his energy would just feel so haggard and run down. Why? Because carrying all of this baggage around and not emptying it. And look, calling your friend to vent, which is something that he likes to do. I am not a proponent of venting unless there's going to be some sort of strategic plan to fix whatever it is you're venting about. But just calling someone to dump your negativity upon them, to make it rain upon them, it's going to make you feel better only because you transferred your burden over to them. And your friend thinks that it's showing you love by just listening to you and saying, "Yeah, I agree," or whatever. No, it's not. It's showing love when you challenge your friend. So somebody can call me to vent, but we're gonna have to come up with some sort of strategy now. And somebody just died or something like that, that's completely different. There's not much you can do to bring somebody back to life. But, the things that people with NPD complain about are active issues, or at least issues they perceive them, but you have remedies for. Okay. And so I would get on Ethan about this, and I would warn him against the folly of just tossing negativity around without any sort of plan. He disagreed, and I just kind of stayed out of it, for, as much as I, have the will control to stay out of it. It just really, really bothers me to hear, negativity repeated, repeated, repeated. I would tell him, if you're going to talk about, say, our relationship problems, go to your mother or somebody who's qualified. Talking to your friend is not going to help them help you help us. But sometimes we think we're doing a loving thing and we're not. It was not a loving thing, really, for me to stay with him as long as I did. I thought I was being merciful and not being judgmental and not being nitpicky by overlooking the times where I knew he was lying, you know, hoping he would grow out of it or change. I thought that that was being good. It wasn't. That was me being naive. It felt like the loving thing to do, but it wasn't. It wasn't the right thing to do. It just wasn't. And so, all of you like to vent, and there was another person who I know and have a lot of respect for. It surprised me when they said that they like to, when something bad happens, they like to talk about it for like 3 days and then that's it. And I'm like, it's an awfully long time to run around with something on your mind like that, and you're not actually doing anything with it. And then you still have that same problem. So let's be careful how we cater to negative thoughts and the negativity. And let's be mindful of how we allow our friends and loved ones to come to us with their negativity. So it's another form of energy vampirism. And people who suffer from NPD are very much energy vampires, especially the covert ones. They don't have a life force driving them, and so they need yours. This is another reason why they cannot exist in a vacuum. When you break up with somebody who suffers from NPD, or they break up with you, it won't be long before they got somebody else. And it's not even about that person. Literally anyone will do, as long as it helps them feel the validation that they need. This is why, after years of a relationship, Ethan did not tell me one nice thing about me apart from value added to him. He did not view me as a beautiful being by myself. You know, he never liked a compliment or do anything like that to me or a stranger or anyone. But he asked for compliments and nice words in return. You know, but when you go and vent to somebody, or you let them vent to you. Perhaps you've had this experience, somebody comes along and they vent to you all this negative stuff, and you just feel burdened after it's over. Well, there was an exchange there. Everything we do that involves another person, there's an energy transfer, be it sex, be it a conversation, and everything in between. It doesn't get no deeper physically than sex. And a conversation is about the most surface, non deep thing that you can have with someone in terms of just the physical interaction involved. But you cannot escape the exchange factor. Like, just words can shift your whole day. You could have been in a totally good mood before this person came along to tell you their problems, and now you're sad. You're sad and you don't even know why, because they're happy because they just zapped you of your energy. It seems like they just want to have an innocent conversation and tell you about some things that have upset them, but really what they're calling to do is to get your to get your energy from you. Now, I don't know how much of this is conscience to people who have NPD, but I know that they have enough sense to know that when they call someone and tell them their problems, that they feel better. I don't know if they realize that in order for that to happen, that they have to take. I don't think they care, because it's not the way people like that work. So if you're the type of person who likes to call around and, just kind of, you know, to do that, think about why. Why? We must move forward. Like I said, if somebody upsets you, at first it's on them. If you want to keep talking about it, then that's just you. After a while, especially there's nothing beneficial coming out of it. If I didn't have this show, if I didn't have my platform, and and ways to reach people and talk to them, I would not still be talking about my ex. But this is a part of my calling, which is to be super transparent and talk about things. Y'all know how I feel about transparency. It has power to heal people. And I go places and I talk to people all over the world and I tell them what happened to me, and I see a change come over people. I see a change come over people. I do. I really, 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 really do. So now let me shift gears from describing those two types of narcissistic personality disorder, being overt and covert, and let's talk about some of the things you can do. Hopefully you listen to this and you're like, don't see really much that you can identify with here. But if you have, hopefully you can be honest enough with yourself to just tell the truth, at least to you, and then see what you can do to work on beginning affecting change in your life. Now, in Raquel's book, she was saying, like, the way back to reality for the one suffering with NPD is to shift the loyalty from the realm of fantasy to the world everyone else shares. This is especially true for the covert narcissist because they do not go out and engage in the real world a lot. Okay. But knowledge is not just going to come jump on you. You have to go out there and get it, just like you go out and get everything else you want. Um, the fantasies, the how can I describe this? So someone who has NPD decides that it's logical for them to go and cheat, and my ex isn't the only one. Infidelity and NPD run in tandem. Seems like most people I've come across who have been stricken with this also got cheated on. Is just the way it goes. Because if you have NPD and you just see people as means to an end, and you don't care about what you do, then you just gonna go out and do it all. So when people say justify cheating, it's because they have convinced themselves. They stepped into a fantasy. They'll tell themselves, "Well, I take care of the wife and the kids. It didn't matter that we took these vows before God that I wasn't going to do this. I now get to go and do this because I have decided that it's totally okay." and then they continue on in it. So a fantasy is different than just say like how I used to get high and go and sleep with someone and then feel terrible about it. This is when my ex and I did not have an open relationship. I was acting out a lot of resentment from him first doing something I considered to be unfaithful, and I didn't know how to handle it. But I would come and tell him I wasn't living in a fantasy. I knew what I did was wrong, and I did not try to justify it. So if you have the ability to live in a fantasy where this double life that you're living, you're seeing this other person more than once. You saw them once and it didn't bother you. You're at a point where you come up with your own set of rules for the world that you live in. Like my ex said, he doesn't think people really want to know the truth. That is a fantasy that he lives in. We all know that is not reality, but that is his reality. And that's why a lie is easy for him to tell. What else have I heard guys say? They cheat on their significant others. They're like, "There's this other side of me I need to get out." I'm like, "Well, you could go and talk to the person about that." No, they don't want to. Maybe it's fear of rejection, judgment, but also apart from people who have NPD getting lost in their fantasies, they love those fantasies. In their own worlds, they don't have a risk of rejection or being hurt. They they get to control everything and everyone. The problem is when they do step down here or up here into reality land, they feel like they can control everybody like they can in their fantasies. And how no matter what it is that they've done, it can be justified somehow, or it doesn't have to be explained, and it doesn't matter. But the lesson here is that the way back to reality for you is to come to terms with the fact that your fantasy is that's just that, a fantasy. I read something somewhere where this one person with NPD was they like to play a lot of video games and do different things like that. In that the fantasy, the characters they created and everything, they carried that fantastical way of thinking away from those games. And they pretty much this person had no other relationships with anybody that didn't revolve around video games. I wonder sometimes how stepping into all of these fantasy worlds, if it doesn't change the way we react with people if we don't have a strong sense of self. I'm not saying every gamer is a high level narcissist, but there might be some intersectionality there because you create these avatars, you create these characters. I mean, if you feel you're happiest when you're at that game console and you're miserable any other time, I could see that rewiring some things in a brain. I'm saying all this to say shifting your loyalty from your fantasy to come here into this world that you have determined is an unsafe place is going to be a process. There's going to be a process. But think about if you can, how it's unfair and how you're hurting people who are a part of your fantasy and don't know. Now we're gonna role play. Let's role play. I should be made aware of that. But if you have NPD, you're the mastermind of this fantasy and you hurt other people because you're hurting. But we have to get you away from that. You have to get yourself away from that because that fantasy is not real. And you wouldn't want it to catch up with you one day, and burst your bubble. How? You're gonna have to have help. You're gonna need some counseling, some spirituality. You need some God, baby, to break this stronghold. Because that fantasy that you have accepted and you've gotten more comfortable with a fantasy than reality, you're in trouble. You are in trouble. Okay, when you are that averse and divorced from reality, you're in trouble. It feels good, but you're actually in trouble. Think about that scene from Percy Jackson's Olympians and the Lightning Thief. I think it was the first part when they go into that casino and those people are giving them those treats, and it puts them in like a fantasy or a high state of euphoria. It felt good, but they were really doing that to keep them distracted from finishing their task. And then spiritually speaking, somebody with NPD is a highly distracted individual. You weren't put on this earth to just create torture for other people and to amass things for yourself, whatever those things may be. The devil wishes to keep you distracted for as long as he can. Because remember, he's the first narcissist and he understands, his narcissism because he tried to overthrow God, literally cost him everything. You don't want to end up like that. But in order to not end up like that, you're going to have to start telling the truth. Remember, Lucifer is the father of lies, and the truth is not in him. And so if you're able to abide in falsehoods, that you are operating in the spirit of Satan, you know, or whatever. If you don't agree that there's a devil, then you can call it negativity or whatever. It's just not a good energy. It's a very low vibration, if any at all, I would dare say. And it's just literally killing you from the inside out. It is hurting you in ways that you know not and draining your life force. That's why my ex would look like a 70-year-old man when I looked at him sometimes. Like he's killing himself, by going out there and doing the things that he's doing. Let's see. People with narcissistic personality disorder are often resistant to therapy. Cooperation doesn't come naturally for narcissists, but it is something they must learn to do if they are to have any hope of recovery. I was explaining this earlier by describing my experience with Ethan in therapy. There's something about people with NPD that likes to bite the hands that feed them and to lash out at the people closest to them. Okay. And to understand why all of this is, it just is for now until I can do more research. You might be resistant to therapy because you don't want to be wrong, but the therapist is not there to judge you. God is not there to judge you. They're there to help you. Now, if you're just not vibing with them, then you can get you another one, but you shouldn't be skipping to a different therapist every week. That's because they didn't say something the exact way you wanted them to say it. And a good therapist is going to be prepared for your narcissism to show up. They're going to be expecting you to try to twist things around and to try to lie and manipulate and gaslight. And they're going to be prepared to not take it personally. They're going to be prepared for you to try to make the therapist the enemy and the villain, and they're not going to take it personally. They will be equipped for that. Now, this says cooperation doesn't come naturally for narcissists, but it's something you must learn to do. They're talking about true cooperation, where you actually fully show up, not just giving the little part of you that you feel safe enough to do in order to get what you need from someone or to get by. It's about true cooperation because you're not going to be able to sit in front of a therapist or before God and just tell, and keep lying. Like you're going to have to turn at some point and start walking into the light and walking out of that darkness. Again, I know this is a heavy thing, to ask of someone with NPD, but would you at least try? I mentioned inpatient treatment. Hmm. It's it's not easy, being in a locked up in a mental health facility. I've been in several, but there's some people we just will not slow down and tend to their mental health state unless they're admitted somewhere. The one I came across today, which I didn't bother to list here because I believe their price was astronomical. But I thought that the concept and the idea was fun. Was fun. Was beneficial. I was saying on a different, on I think the bonus show that I just released that I was thinking like, why do we have people who say, like, I don't know, commit murders or crimes and steal things from people, who go to jail, but people with NPD, you know, are not, like, nothing happens to them for the things that they do to people. And I said, I don't know if they should go to jail, but like something needs to happen because the terror is just too great. And I think, an inpatient treatment is something for you to consider. Am I comparing a person with NPD to a murderer? Yep, because you literally kill the person that you're with, sometimes physically, but definitely mentally and emotionally. I think about the poor woman I heard about who got shot, so shot to death at point blank range during Thanksgiving dinner by her narcissistic husband. So not only did she have to live a life of torture with him, but she had to die that way too at his hands. You know, Not suggesting everyone with NPD is going to go commit murder, but I am saying that I don't really, a physical death, a mental death, an emotional death, all stop the person from existing in effect. Are you going to a bank and robbing people's money, which is insured by the FDIC? No, but you are robbing people of their energy, and their life force, of their identity. I had to, myself and many people I've talked to have had to remember just who the fuck we are, after these relationships have ended. Can't tell you when we lost ourselves along the way. You know, tell you to look at the 10 Commandments different now. Thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not kill. Well, they already said not to commit adultery in there. That's another one. People with narcissistic personalities or just threw that out the window. Thou shalt not lie. you know, it's just so baffling to me because people who I know are narcissists go set up in church all the time. They go. And then they go out and do all of these things. Like maybe some part of you knows you're not right. And I don't know. But one thing that they used to say in church that I actually agree with, they used to say, being in church doesn't make you a Christian, or saved or anything like that, no more than standing in the driveway makes you a car. I don't understand how somebody could be before the Lord for as many years as some of these people have and still go out and cheat and lie. Just people in my family who do this. And they have therapists. And I'm like, hmm. So I'm saying all this to say, if you're gonna bother with any of these things, don't fake it. Don't go to a therapist unless you're really ready to try and able to take disappointments or at least try to talk through them. The covert narcissist, please stop getting lost in your own thoughts. Invite other people in, especially people who have demonstrated that they care for you in all kinds of ways. They're not perfect, neither are you. So come let us reason together. As the Lord was telling us earlier in this message, let us reason, let us talk it out. Even God is willing to sit through and have a conversation to see what we can do to get this thing right. You are not above God. The spirit of the devil abiding in you has you thinking that you are. But this is not about your conscious thinking you're above God. It's the fact that you won't humble yourself down. Okay. In order to be kind to God's children, to the people of this earth, and to find out why you are here, you're not going to be able to discover your true purpose, harboring resentment and unforgiveness and abiding in a highly narcissistic attitude and spirit. Those two things work against each other. Truth is the spirit, lies is death. Like you can't serve two masters at one time, as Jesus was saying. You can't serve God and mammon, God and the devil. You can't serve light and dark. When you are overthrown with NPD, you yet walk in darkness. You do because you have too much unresolved within you. You have too much unresolution, if that's a word. If not, it just became one. So you see, what you got to do is go back and clear up the problems, and then you can see your way forward. And then it may feel weird once you do begin to have clarity, and you begin to feel happy because your brain has gotten wired and your emotions have gotten wired to misery. So, and yes, I've seen narcissistic people laugh at the way that they toy with people and make them miserable. I've seen this, and this is not all big things. It'll be like sly little comments that people at NPD will say just to get under your skin, and they get off on the torture. That's because they are tortured. So if you have NPD and you begin to revert back to those old ways, just make space for it and then try to move forward. Because you've been in dark so long, your eyes are going to have to adjust to any kind of light. It will be weird. It will be unusual, but don't be fearful. God has not given you a spirit of fear. That came from the devil. What God gave you was a spirit of power and of love and of a sound mind. If you have NPD, you do not have a sound mind. You do not have sound emotions. You don't. Not because you're imperfect, but because you're unwilling to embrace your imperfections and work on them and truly work on letting them go and granting forgiveness to the people, letting go, letting go of it all, what you've done and what other people have done. Inpatient treatment can be good because when you're there, they could work on a lot of your other issues too. Be get the obsessive compulsive disorder, the depression, and all of those different things, and it'll force you to stop. I see people, with such bad nerves that they can't sit and be still in a room. They've always got to go find someone or something to do, and they don't realize that all of that activity isn't healing anything. The inpatient treatment can like force you to do that. I don't know how long they are, or if like financially or what sort of life you have, you can. But heck, I don't know, man. Maybe try it for a few days. I don't know. Can you turn your phone off at your own place of residence? And can you truly unplug from all people and all the electronics and just take your own mental health break and not be around anybody? You wouldn't have the benefit of doctors there, but God moves in stillness, the still small voice. Let's see. There's this thing called psychodynamic therapy. I'm going to just read you this definition. I just learned about this today as I was getting my notes together for this. And it says, in psychodynamic therapy sessions, patients with NPD will plumb the depths of their past experiences to evaluate the effects of problematic relationships on their lives and to examine unconscious assumptions about themselves and others that support narcissistic attitudes. This I love. Raquel mentioned this in her book too. This is not her definition. This came from elsewhere. Because what this is getting into is even for the person suffering from NPD, beginning to understand why you feel what you feel and why you think what you think and why you do the things you do. Even if the explanation is fucked up and you're like, okay, I taunted that person because I love to see them get tortured, because I'm unhappy and this is what I like to do to people. Okay, if that is your reality and that is where we got to start, then that's where we have to start because it is what it is. And at least it's the truth finally. And what did Jesus say? You shall know the truth and the truth shall make you free. Not all truth is going to be pleasant, but it is the pathway to freedom. Lies are going to keep you in bondage until you live out your days, and then you just don't want to depart this plane of existence, as a liar. You just don't. There's somebody who hurts people like this. Don't. Just don't. Now, I don't know who has psychodynamic therapy available, but this is your path. If you feel like this is something that you have a problem with and that you want to overcome, I tried to look it up. I couldn't really find anything. It seems like it might be relatively new-ish, but I would ask around if you really, really want it. this healing, you're going to have to go and get it. Those of us who have experience in dealing with NPDs know the one of the main things we are not supposed to do is to do everything for you. That was another thing that I thought I was doing that was being loving, and I really gave my ex way too much. I was too kind to him, and it seemed innocent, but it actually wasn't good. Parents can have a part to play in their kids becoming narcissists, high level narcissists, if they do too much for them. Raquel covers this in her book. Things that seem innocent, like letting your friend vent to you, showering kids with gifts, spoiling that partner. We need to evaluate, you know, maybe not. It just depends on the person. But I was so excited about this psychodynamic therapy. And it almost, it kind of like has references to maybe some neurolinguistic sort of work here because it's trying to locate patterns and undo them. I don't know that this is really like a super ongoing sort of thing. What I came across made it seem like it's done in sets or like with a finite amount of sessions. But in order to do this, if you have NPD, you're going to have to probably write out what your narcissistic attitudes are and then work in reverse. You know, that's how I would guide it. What are you doing? What do people see to complain about? Or because you may not know what you're doing and like consciously that it falls under this. But anyway, psychodynamic therapy, it sounds incredible. I encourage you to research it because again, your loved one should not be doing this for you. If you have some sort of physical disability or some sort of other disability that prevents you from being able to do research, that's one thing. But with most NPD people, just like you go out there and get everything else you want in life from that you feel like is going to bring you pleasure, this must be something that you decide to do, you know, for yourself. Cognitive behavioral therapy is one that a lot of people have heard of. It reads through multiple sessions of CBT, narcissistic personality disorder sufferers can learn to replace grandiose and distorted thoughts with more positive and realistic ideas and self assessments. This sounds like, your regular talk therapy on steroids, giving you like actual, tangible things you can do, but still recognizing what it is that makes you have a narcissistic personality disorder and coming to terms with that and being okay with that, not judging yourself for it. And look, who have NPD have hurt a lot of people. Okay. Some of them you can go apologize and make it right. Some of them you can't. But nevertheless, you're going to have to forgive yourself for whatever it is that you've done. Now, it's going to be difficult for you to do that if you're still doing those sort of things. So I don't, in my opinion, you can't start true healing until you identify why you have been the way you've been and get it identified at least and under some level of control. Because if you can't forgive yourself for having a double life, if you still have a double life, even if it was a different person, you're still about a double life. You cannot forgive yourself for lying if you lie. You lie to people every day. Because you're still doing it. So it's going to take some time to really get to that point. But once you do, it is crucial that you do let let that let yourself just be okay with your humanity and the things that you've done to people because now you don't do those things anymore. You've worked on it. You're starting to do them less. You're headed in the right direction. Forgiveness is for everyone, all around. Period. God granted me the grace to stop like blaming myself for the way everything went with me and Ethan. didn't blame myself for him going out and doing the things he did. I didn't blame myself for his habits or his lying or for shoving off the help I tried to give him. I was kicking myself in the ass for being stupid enough to stay with him as long as I did. I'm smarter than that. I saw what he was doing, and I stayed anyway. I don't think I was codependent. It just wasn't irrational. I hadn't been through quite enough yet to leave, but I didn't know how much I was damaging myself because this is the first relationship I've really had. It's certainly one that was really this long. And so the Lord told me, it's in my spirit, this understanding came upon me while I was here in Puerto Vallarta that the only thing that would be a shame, or that is shameful in this whole situation in terms of, my 5-year relationship is that if I would close my mouth and not tell the lessons that I've learned. The only thing that would be a shame is for all of this experience and knowledge to be wasted if I tried to go and have a successful, quiet life and didn't say anything to help anyone else. It is baffling me to this day. You know, here I am at the age of 40, and I'm not saying I learned it late. I believe everybody learns everything when they're supposed to. But damn, man, like for this to be such a big part of society, I don't know if God just kept my ears shielded from it so he could put me through this specific experience with Ethan so that I could grow through this experience. But this needs to be talked about so much more. When I look up, books on Amazon about narcissism, at least at first go right, find a lot. You know, all the relationship stuff they talk to us about in church and in school, narcissism didn't come up. You know, where where was the education on narcissistic personality disorder? Where was it? Medication is the last thing. It says medication from research tends to be, this is from Raquel's book. She's saying medication from my research tends to be reserved to treat the symptoms of the person suffering from NPD. So they might medicate you to help with the depression, the OCD, the pathological lying. I was shocked to find out there's actually medicine to help people if they lie a lot. Hmm. Paranoia, angry outbursts. So if they can medically treat a pathological liar, that means that there's some sort of chemical process that happens within people that makes them derive like a sense of pleasure or something from the lying or something like that because you're using medicine to change somebody's chemical makeup, especially when it comes to mental health things. So, lying is something that I'm very like unfamiliar with. Most people tell me I say too much and just put myself out there too much. And so trying to understand, you know, people who lie more than tell the truth has been a real challenge, but it's one that I'm up for because not everything's about me. Not everything's about my perspective and about my point of view. And so there's also a website that I'm going to put in the show notes, and it's just a website that has like about 33 different healing verses. These things were usually meant and directed towards physical healing, but if you are suffering from narcissistic personality disorder, then you really need a healing. You need God to come down here and work on you. You know, going over these scriptures from time to time or on a daily basis can help to put inside you the belief that change is possible, from a spiritual perspective. If you're not a spiritual person, maybe you can read them for the positive vibrations and the attitude if you so desire. When people get sick, when they have physical sicknesses, they will turn to these scriptures and use it to combat the thoughts that they're going to die or that the sickness has to stay. because everything we come across in life imprints upon us. We are impacted by it all. And this is why when we're abusive relationships with people, we don't realize how much that it's hurting us until it's piled up because it was subtle. The same thing goes if you are doing positive reinforcement for yourself through positive quotes, positive scriptures. This one I like because it's specific to healing. For instance, it says like from Proverbs that pleasant words are as a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and health to the bones. And from John, and a great multitude followed him because they saw his miracles, which he did on them that were diseased. Once you understand that you are suffering from narcissistic personality disorder, this means that you are a sick person who needs to be made well. I will drop this link in there so that you can perhaps reference it or whatever it is that you feel like might work for you. Well, reach out to me if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. This heavy subject matter. This is a very, very heavy subject matter. But I have come to terms with the fact that this is real and that there are a lot of people in the world like this. And now that I'm over the shock of discovery, I am happy to do whatever I can to help even the high level narcissists who are suffering from NPD who are out there hurting people. Evangelist Nelson would have, you know, would want me to do this. She does want me to do this. God certainly wants me to do this. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not. I'm not. I just have to I just have to learn more about this. This is such a vast field of study once you get into it. But mercy. This is about mercy. This is about meeting people where they are, even if it's somebody who is a high level narcissist who doesn't care how they destroy people. This is as far as I've come in terms of being able to pray for people with NPD and to speak mercy over them and to really, really pitying them. I feel so sorry for people who live like this. I feel so sorry for people who live this way. So I'm going to keep doing my research, and if there's anything else I can come up with to help people who have NPD, then I will. And and just remember, just healing, all healing comes from God. That's my viewpoint. And he says that, and God says that he will crown our efforts with success, not our perfection, not our belief in our perfection. He didn't say he'd help us because we were popular. He said, because in our weakness, his strength is made perfect. You're suffering from NPD. You have weakness inside of you. This is the perfect breeding ground for God to come and heal you and to wrap you in his big old loving arms and to embrace you. I need you to believe that you are loved and that you are lovable. Yes, the very hairs of your head are numbered, and God considers you to be the very apple of his eye. And you are a special person to God, and God is willing to help you and to work with you. If you don't want to believe in God, then the therapist can be your champion too, but you're going to need help. So please seek it. Please stop hurting people. Please stop hurting yourself. And again, you don't have to get it all right the first time. Give yourself patience. Eventually learn to forgive yourself. God said he will crown your efforts with success. Make the effort, no matter how little, how minuscule, how seemingly insignificant. If it's only picking up the phone to call somebody, like a therapist, if it's just researching what getting treatment for this would look like, or researching the symptoms again, that's effort. It counts. Whether it's saying a little 2-second prayer, confessing to God what you think is going on with you, it matters. Anything you can do is not too small. So just try. Just try, try. And if you do, the change is going to come because I have prayed for you and God listens to my prayers. I want you to remember, especially my babies out there with NPD, that everything is going to be all right.